Hello, Paul Cox here. I've just seen this and I thought we'd analyse it together.
I think it's becoming ridiculous now that we have members of parliament of the governing party acting as political presenters on TV channels. These programmes are supposed to be scrutinising the government. There should be a line between the media, the fourth estate, and the people running the country. There isn't anymore. It's getting preposterous.
So the argument with these people who put themselves out there, MPs who put themselves out there, are actually reaching out to the people who wouldn't normally vote.
That's our old friend Owen Jones there, Guardian writer, left-wing activist on the BBC One's Sunday Morning Live programme. Sunday Morning Live is essentially a religious discussion programme where they talk about politics, cultural things and those things that affect people, particularly Owen.
So there's some people would say
nice way of looking at it.
Well, yes, it is a nice way of putting it, isn't it? That's Marina Purkiss there, a left-wing commentator. By the way, this show is not just left-wing commentators. The BBC do add quite a bit of balance to this show, and they do counter a number of the left-wing points to add that balance.
People would say there's political apathy, and actually by putting themselves in different mediums, they're getting people out there.
How is it right? And Ofcom are absolutely, I don't know what they're doing, just fingers in ears. How on earth is it okay for a serving politician to go onto a news channel which calls itself the Great British News Channel?
Well, we're not going to bash
another news channel. Fine. But how is it allowed for a serving politician to go onto that channel and actually talk about their own policies and promote themselves?
Edwina?
Come on.
Edwina, quickly on that.
Because they're not a public service broadcaster. We have two public service broadcasters in this country, the BBC and Channel 4. That's it.
And that is it. Well put, Edwina. That is exactly it. Whether you like it or not, they're not a bought and paid for public broadcaster, and they can broadcast within the Ofcom rules as they wish. And this seems to be a big issue for people on the left. Okay, let's jump into this, shall we? They are, of course, talking about Jacob Rees-Mogg's show. It's an hour show that runs on weekday nights on GB News, a channel I work for. As many people know, I am on the Headliners programme, which is the hilarious, genuinely hilarious newspaper review show that's on between 11 and midnight. Check it out. There isn't a better newspaper review show across the country. So let's take a look at Owen Jones's point there. He thinks it's preposterous that a news channel, which he puts in inverted commas and gets quite irate about, is able to use a Conservative MP to broadcast his own personal views on a daily basis. Now, he bases this on the fact that he is a self-proclaimed anti-fascist. He is a left-wing activist. He believes very heavily in socialism. So he believes in state control. So what he would like to see is the BBC and Ofcom having much greater powers, and he'd like to see them both stamp it straight out. And I say both because, in my view, I see the BBC and the Ofcom as virtually one body. Let's face it, the BBC is very much a public broadcaster. In many ways, it sets the rules for Ofcom, whether Ofcom would believe that or not. But it does, because you very rarely see the BBC brought up on any very serious Ofcom charges. And let's be honest, GB News didn't have very many Ofcom problems until it started to win awards and get a much greater share of the viewership. So what we've got now are Conservative politicians able to speak directly to largely Conservative constituents across the country. Now, you could argue that that is a bad thing, and why would you have something so partisan? But in order to argue that, you have to accept that up until this point, every other channel on TV has been left-leaning for quite some time. This has been proven time and time and time again by correspondents who worked for Sky and the BBC and ITV, jumping ship and creating their own very left-wing podcasts. So they have revealed their cards straight away. We all know that. And you know what? I don't have a massive issue with that. In fact, I prefer that it's out in the open. I would have preferred if it had been out in the open when they were working for the BBC and ITV and Sky. However, it wasn't. We were made to believe constantly that it was impartial. It wasn't. So with that context, we can see that there was a lot of left-wing bias on mainstream media. It was just much more secretive than it is on channels like GB News. So for once we are getting balance. We're getting balance of choice. And this is causing a problem. particularly for people like Owen Jones, who doesn't want to see this whatsoever, and it's making them quite angry.
How is it allowed for a certain politician to go onto that channel and actually talk about their own policies and promote themselves?
How is it allowed? Let's revisit that. Allowed. So how is someone being given permission to express their opinion, particularly if it's different to mine? Wow. Now, I'm on live TV. This is live TV. It is tricky, and in the moment you can get quite emotive about subject matter. I'm a centrist. I consider myself centre-left, but many people would probably say now, given the climate we're in, that I'm perhaps centre-right. However, I've been in a situation, and you say things that come to mind immediately. But she genuinely believes this. She must genuinely believe it, because I've heard her say it a number of times before. Allowed. Think of the language. Allowed. Madness. It's allowed because we live in a democracy. I'm not suggesting, at least I'm hoping, that she doesn't want to take democracy away. Maybe she does. Maybe that is their version of socialism. Maybe that's their version of left-wing politics. But that's not anti-fascist.